Welcome to This Explainer. We're jumping right into a clear, completely kitchen-friendly breakdown of what makes different pastry doughs behave the way they do. If you've ever stared at a recipe, just wondering why your dough didn't puff up or why your tart shell completely collapsed in the oven, well, you're in the exact right place. Today, we're decoding the actual science of baking to help you master those pastry fundamentals. Okay, so let's tackle this crucial question that honestly haunts a lot of home bakers. When exactly should you use a flaky, crumbly, or puff pastry? It's really not just about picking whatever sounds good in the moment. It's about understanding how the ingredients structurally interact to give you the exact texture your specific recipe needs. Because let's face it, choosing the right dough is literally the difference between a dreaded soggy bottom and a bakery quality masterpiece. Let's start with crumbly pastry, known for being tender and sandy. When you're working with this particular dough, I want you to just keep this defining quote in your head. Holds its shape, breaks clean. It perfectly describes that melt-in-the-mouth, incredibly tender bite. You aren't looking for a chaotic shatter of flakes here, right? You want a clean, predictable snap that instantly yields into this beautifully sandy texture as you eat it. Now, what's really fascinating about this is the fat method. Every single bit of fat is thoroughly integrated into the flour. Unlike other pastries where we try to keep the butter separate, here we're intentionally working that fat completely in. You literally rub it in until the whole mixture looks like fine breadcrumbs. And here's exactly why we do that. Because the fat completely coats the flour. It physically limits gluten development. Gluten is what gives dough its chew and stretch, and honestly, we definitely do not want that here. By coating the flour, we create that signature sandy texture that crumbles instead of flakes. Plus, you'll notice this dough has absolutely minimal rise in the oven. So the big takeaway? You want to use this structural, crumb-heavy dough for things like sweet pies, quiches, and traditional Jamaican patties. Because it holds its shape so perfectly and doesn't puff up, it makes the ultimate sturdy yet tender vessel for holding heavy, wet fillings. Think about a rich egg custard in a quiche or a heavy fruit filling in a tart shell. It's perfect for that. Moving on to flaky pastry, where it's all about layers to pull apart. And layers you can pull apart is the absolute perfect mental anchor for this one. You're aiming for a light, crisp texture where the layers distinctively separate. It shouldn't be uniform like the crumbly pastry we just talked about. Instead, it needs a slightly rustic, deeply satisfying crispness that actually flakes away when you take a bite. The real magic here is restraint. The fat method means the fat is rubbed or lightly cut in so small pieces remain visible. By only lightly mixing, you ensure those small, visible chunks of fat actually survive the initial mixing process. You're deliberately doing, a half job of rubbing the fat into the flour. Seriously, if you can't see little, distinct pieces of butter in your raw dough, you've gone a bit too far. So why do we need those visible pieces? Well, when the heat of the oven hits those little butter chunks, they melt and create steam, literally lifting the layers apart to give us a moderate rise. It's this exact steam escaping from the pockets of butter that creates the distinct flakes. Simply put, no chunks of butter means no pockets of steam, which means no flakes. You're going to want to rely on this lightly mixed method whenever you're craving a hearty meat pie, a savory turnover, sausage rolls, or a classic apple turnover. These are all applications where you want a nice moderate rise and a very satisfying textural crunch. But you don't necessarily need the super intense, delicate airiness of a fancy French bakery pastry. Now for the grand finale, puff pastry, known for its tall, dramatic rise. Yes, tall, dramatic bakery-style rise. If you're looking for that absolute wow factor with very light, crisp, airy layers, this is the exact goal you're chasing. This dough is almost entirely defined by how aggressively it expands in the oven, completely transforming from a relatively flat sheet into a towering, flaky structure. The fat method used here is a much more advanced technique called lamination, where butter is folded and rolled in layers. You're no longer just quickly rubbing butter into a bowl of flour. No, you're taking a solid block of butter, wrapping dough completely around it, and painstakingly rolling it out and folding it over on itself over and over again. And this brilliantly illustrates the explosive power of baking. The water inside that laminated butter violently turns to steam, physically pushing apart hundreds of distinct layers for a super high rise. Because you've folded the dough so many times, you've created alternating microscopic sheets of dough and butter. So when that high heat hits, boom, you get that magnificent rise as the steam gets trapped between every single layer. This is the exact dough that brings to life those elegant, towering bakery favorites. We're talking croissants, vol au vents, millefeuille, and all sorts of elegant, savory, and sweet pastries. Whether it's a beautiful shell holding a savory filling or an intricate sweet treat, lamination is the undeniable secret behind those hundreds of delicate, shattering layers. Let's pull this all together with a side-by-side snapshot. Notice the really clear progression here on this table. Look at crumbly pastry. It's the easiest to make with fully mixed butter, giving a tender texture but absolutely no layers and low rise. Now step over to flaky, and a light mix of the butter gives us a medium rise with crisp layers. And finally, puff pastry on the far right. Lamination results in those advanced, super airy layers and a very high rise. It literally all comes down to how you handle the butter. So, let's establish the golden baking rule. It's a super simple mental checklist. Step 1. Need structure and tenderness? Go crumbly. Step 2. Want a satisfying bite with visible layers? Choose flaky. And step 3. Want that wow factor height and absolute crispness? It has to be puff. If your filling is heavy, go crumbly. If you want a rustic crunch, go flaky. If you want to impress, go puff. Armed with the science of how fat transforms flour and water into actual edible art, the only question left is, which pastry will you master first? Understanding these foundational blueprints takes the guesswork completely out of baking and puts the control right back in your hands. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Now get in the kitchen and see what you can create.